Didn't expect such a crowded room, but it's a pleasure for me to be here, especially talking about something I'm deeply passionate about, which is how we are leveraging agents in Moody's. It's a little bit of feedback, right, with the sound, or not? Yeah. Okay, good. I've been in Moody's for 17 years, have worked in a lot of things, and like for me to think 17 years ago that I was going to be talking today about agentic solutions, it's like blows my mind away. And maybe that's where we'll start, right? We're going to talk today about how we're using not one, but several agents and how we started about this journey. What have we learned from working with participants of the financial services industry through that? And then maybe let me okay, now it's working. So maybe I'll start about why this innovation is different, and I'm sure you all know about it. But from a Moody's perspective, we had always been working with machine learning for years, right? We are a quantitative shop by nature. We develop models for. Should I not move for the feedback or? Yeah. Okay. We had been developing models for quantitative purposes for years. With machine learning, and we had trying to work with natural language. I'm sorry, there's something with the sound that we need to fix, right? No? Okay, I just feel that there's noise all the time when I talk. Is it chairs? Okay, now we figure it out. We need a technology to figure it out. Okay, good. So we had been working with models for years using machine learning, data extraction. We had done some attempts to write some reports on the credit rating agency with natural language generation. Some things were very good for the models. Other things we had, started the project and quickly abandoned it because we were not seeing it, right? And then comes November 30, 2022. What happened on November 30 of 2022? Any guesses? That was the announcement by Sam Altman of ChatGPT, right? And we quickly started experimenting on it. We were very lucky that from the CEO level, I'm part of the Moody's Analytics, the non-rated part of the company, and we had a mandate to start working very quickly with GenAI. And the reason for that was because we recognize and we fully believe this is as revolutionary as the Industrial Revolution, because for the first time we are automating knowledge. And what we mean by that is when we work with banks, when we work with asset managers, when we work with insurance companies, we are working on things, and I'll show you an example on how can we leverage agentic solutions to automate things such as lead generation, to prepare a company briefing, to prepare an M&A pitch book, to do a credit memo, to use early warning for portfolio monitoring purposes. So that's really an automation of the work that a knowledge worker did. And that's the reason we are so focused on transforming the way we do businesses with financial services through agentic solutions, right? So if I move to the second part about how we went about it, we did two big things. The first one is, as a company, if we were going to preach something to financial services and say, we think you all should be transforming and using agents, well, we have to practice this first. So we went very quickly, and we rolled out Copilot to the 14,000 employees in Moody's. And then the next phase is we started working with each of the big family groups. So that's engineers, for example, to make sure that we empower them and we allow them to use things such as GitHub Copilot, things such as Cursor, Windsurf. So yes, following a lot of kind of with the proper risk controls, but we've really enabled our workforce to leverage GenAI tools, and not only to leverage, it's encourage, right? Which I think was the third part of the transformation. The first one is let's give everyone, access to these tools. The second one is let's go more specific towards specific job families, such as engineers, such as our sales team, customer service. I was just meeting this morning with my product team to see how they can start generate product briefs, and from there generate a Figma through GenAI, right? So we really are encouraging and empowering people to drive a culture of innovation and a culture of adapting what we are trying to then sell to our customers, right? And then the second part was about understanding what was the impact on financial services. And I don't think I have to tell you much about that, but we started seeing, when we meet with a lot of banks, when we meet with asset managers, how there was a mandate from the C-level, and this is across the globe, that they have to implement agentic solutions, that they have to implement GenAI. We also started encountering, we usually meet, because of the nature of our business, with CROs, with chief credit officers, with lending officers, and suddenly, in a lot of our meetings, COOs were appearing. And why COOs were appearing? Because they have the mandate that they have to drive efficiencies on the business through GenAI. So that was one topic, one big topic around efficiencies. How can we bring more consistency to the work we do? How can we do it better? How can we derive insights through this? The second thing we also saw is, there's a lot of risk, right? How do we trust GenAI? How do I know if this is hallucinating or not? How do I make sure that my data suddenly doesn't go out to the world? How do I make sure that I'm not infringing IP rights when I talk about this? How do we start? How do we go through the red tape of transformation offices that take 6 months to approve that, right? So we started seeing both things, and I'll talk first about some of the ways we're working with banks and asset managers and insurance companies, and then I'll talk a little bit about how we've seen those conversations about risk and challenges evolving, right? So when I talk about how we think about we're delivering value through GenAI in Moody, so we basically like to think about 3 layers. The first one is we have a huge data state. We have data on private companies. We have data on commercial real estate. We have the ratings and research, which we're more known, but we are thinking very actively about how we deliver that data so it's GenAI ready for our customers to use. And one of the things we're doing there, for example, is we're working, we're now talking every day about what's the right protocol, right? For example, what's the right MCP server we should be using that, right? So how do we get that data ready in the hand of customers? And also, what's our commercial strategy, right? Should we keep selling our raw data? Should we always do kind of MCP-enabled data? Should we be attaching some sort of tools or task agents with it? So there's a lot of conversations about how do we define our GenAI, our data as GenAI ready, and also, candidly, a lot about how do we protect ourselves, right? How do we make sure that we keep being relevant as a data provider in the future, and this does not become a commodity, right? The second part, and this is actually where we started with GenAI, so I'll talk a little bit about that, is specialized assistants. So we started with what we called research assistant and actually leveraging some of the models from AWS, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And we, on April 2023, we said we're going to devote 1 squad. That's how we started. 1 squad to see what we can do with that. We're going to do it in Moody's.com because we had just refactored and we had a pretty robust technology stack. And we're going to do it with research and ratings because that's the data set that we know the best. So with that, we basically, this is familiar with you, it looks very similar to the chat interfaces. We started with research and ratings. We quickly started including other data sets. You can see how it's selecting news. It's selecting, it tells you, do you want to, maybe, can we go back for a second? Yes? Okay. Good. So maybe if we start here, you're going to see, right, I'm asking a prompt. It's a very detailed prompt. So we proud ourselves that we can understand intent in the financial context. We also give you the ability to select data, to select news, to upload your own PDF. And then you're going to see in a second how it's going to develop a pretty detailed prompt that follows the specific content that I asked for, that follows the specific instructions that I gave it in terms of bullets, in terms of if I want a table, and most importantly, and this is where we've done a lot of emphasis, that you can always trace the responses. This has been a journey. We've been 18 months in the market with this. And again, the emphasis has been about how do we bring transparency into the market about where our responses come from, how do we make sure we mitigate hallucinations, And then a big journey in terms of expanding the coverage that we offer. We started with information on 6,000 companies. We now have information on 200,000, almost 200,000 companies here, more than 100 customers globally. It's the product with the fastest adoption we've ever launched in Moody's, and we're still working on it, right? And we thought we were in the panacea. Honestly, if you had asked me in July of last year, we were in all the earnings calls of the CEO, super happy with what he had achieved. And then we started hearing about agents. And we're like, we're out of, we're already late. We're already outdated because the new thing is agents, and we're still working with a chat. So that's the third layer. And this is where we see the biggest potential on GenAI, right? Which is agentic solutions. So again, we started saying, well, and the first thing was understanding the potential of agents. And what do we mean by agents, right? And I'm sure if I ask around the room, we're going to get 10 different definitions of agents. So we're thinking about agents as things that can do complex planning, that can leverage some sort of knowledge base, that usually can go in a loop to refine the answers, and we could keep defining them. And then we thought about, okay, what can we deliver? And actually the labels in the next slide that I'm going to show you are a little bit outdated. But the way we're thinking about our agentic solutions are, we have tools, which is the domain agents, which is what we call internally, you could think about as a set of tools, right? You have tools that get company information. You have tools that get news. You have tools that get sanctions. You have tools that get climate. You have tools that can go into a 10Q or a 10K and get the information, right? So those tools are very, very good at getting information from a certain document, and they have the context to understand what type of information you're getting. The second thing is we attach to those tools tasks, which is what we're calling the task agents there. And there's even more granular task agents than what we're showing there, right? So we have task agents that do SWOT analysis. We have task agents that are very good at financial analysis. We have task agents that do comparisons. And then you can think about, you package some of those task agents with some of those tools, and then you are able to actually automate some of the tasks that I have in the screen, right? So we're working, as an example, with companies around the world to automate the credit memo function. Credit memo, if you're in a lending process, usually at some point, you meet your client, you pitch the solution, you decide there's a good potential opportunity to lending, and then you're going to build a credit memo. And I'm sure that some of you in the audience know much more than I do about a credit memo. What's the opportunity there? Well, there's a savings opportunity, because usually you have, several analysts or hundreds of analysts working on the credit memo. You are outsourcing it to a KPO. You have inconsistency issues. You sometimes want to, provide more content, but you have the limitation of cost, sources of information. So basically, and the other characteristic of this is it's very consistent. It's very repetitive. You actually have, what are the sections of a credit memo, right? So in the automation of this type of tasks is where initially we found a lot of success. Now I'm going to show you how it works. I'm going to probably ask in the back to pause several times to the video. I would have loved to do a demo for you, but we didn't want to risk it, so we actually have a video. So what I'm going to show you in the screen, and I think if I click the first time, it's just the image, right? So this is what we called AI Studio, right? And you can see some of the agents I presented in the previous slide. You can see it here, right? So there's a sales intelligence agent that basically is going to identify opportunities depending on the type of company you are. So I see SAC in the back. And for example, if SAC was using the sales intelligence report, it would say probably go to pitch at Moody's, whatever latest models Anthropic has, because they're very keen in doing GenAI. And you should talk to this person in Moody's, and you should be having this dialogue, right? So that's an example of what a sales intelligence report would do. I'm going to show you today the credit memo one. And the first thing we're going to see, and I'm going to ask them to pause, is actually the steps that the agent follows and the different sources of information that the agent takes to deliver a credit memo, right? So I'm going to click, and then if you can pause when I tell you. So it's going to select the credit memo. Can we pause here for a second? Right, so where you see in the diagram is basically you're going to see that the program has built kind of a tree with the different steps that we're going to take to build a credit memo agent, right? So if we look at some of the steps, it's going to say, get or key indicators. That are the indicators for our organization. Find the companies that need to be. Get the companies, search annual report, build the overview, build the corporate structure management, right? So there can be anything. I think here we have 40 steps. As to give you an example, we're working now with a European bank, which the credit memo has 300 steps. But basically, we create and organize it in such a way that the agents are going to define the steps. So they're going to do complex planning, which is one of the characteristics we talked about. And then they're going to start running. And when we hit play again in a second, one thing you're going to see that we're going to keep on your left-hand side this diagram, and you're going to see how the diagram starts moving. If you see tasks in blue, is the tasks that the agents are working on. When you see tasks in green are the tasks that the agents have completed. When you see tasks in, I believe it's orange, is tasks that they didn't find the information, they didn't complete it. So that's going to be on your left-hand side. On your right-hand side, you're going to see the steps sequentially. You're going to have a tracker of what's the percentage of the credit memo that was completed. And if I would like for you to pay attention to the number of sources and the different sections that it's working. So now I'm going to hit play again, if we're fine, and we're going to let it run, right? And it's a little bit long, but I think it's incredible how you can see again. You can see the tracking. Blue, again, is the sections that it's working on. Green is the sections it has completed, right? And the other thing I would pause is look at the different content that is pulling, the different sections, right? It's talking about a country profile, it's doing industry analysis, it's doing segment analysis. And at the very end, once it continues, you're going to see you're going to see the credit memo, right? And once it produces the credit memo, then we're going to have the ability to edit all of this. And we don't have it in this video, but actually the idea is that you edit your credit memo through a chat interface, right? So we were just looking at it this morning. It's a feature that we're gonna release in the coming days. And you're going to say, well, I want to edit the industry analysis in this part. Well, what you would like to add? So it makes suggestions. It allows you do you want to add more sources? Do you want to refine the response? So a lot of the things we see when we interact with chat interfaces. But I would say the value here is we're taking the best technology in the market, many times is models from Anthropic. We're taking the subject matter expertise that we have in Moody's, and we're taking data, either proprietary or third party, putting it all together to develop specialized solutions. So this is actually showing, this is the credit memo completed, and you can see that, that has a lot of content. All the sources are always there. You can always link and provide more details. So I hope that this exemplifies how we're using agents. This was one example, but the same things can be used, for example, for early warning purposes. In the case of early warning, we're taking things such as news. We were doing a demo a couple of days ago where, we were taking tariffs as a market event. And if you look at tariffs and you are, in the front line of a banker, you might say, well, tariffs are going to impact, manufacturers in a big manner. Let me go and pitch them some sort of, loan, or take a look at their credit risk profile in light of those. So those are the type of things where we're comparing different types of information with the subject matter expertise we have with agents to not only automate tasks, but provide big efficiencies. So we have 9 minutes left. I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, this is a little bit of a Q2 AWS. We do use a lot of the services from Amazon. We are big fans of the Claude models. We can talk about this after the talk. We've been using, Bedrock for years, so we do leverage their services very, very heavily. So I wanted to spend the last minutes here talking a little bit about the things we've learned by working with our customers, right? And can I get a raise of hand? How many of you work in banks, asset managers, insurance? Okay, like half of the room, I would say. So I would say that I've never had so many conversations about what are your controls as I've had in the last 12 months, right? This is something I never talked with a customer, right? I would go and talk about ratings or talk about, a probability of default model or, talk about financial spreading and how we're automating it. But the conversation was never, what type of controls do you have in place? And that's, number one topic that comes. This is all fantastic, but how do you deal with your risks? What type of controls do you have in place? And then the second question, which is attached to that, is how did you go through the red tape? How you, being a rating agency, got your risk departments, your audit departments, or your cyber departments to approve those things, right? My advice here is start small, right? Where we see the bigger success when we talk to banks is start small, have a dedicated team that really understands what you're trying to do, and then work with the risk departments very early on. In a conference we had last week in Miami, we were talking to some of the banks that are using GenAI, and one of the questions we ask is, what would have you done better if you were starting right now? And we were surprised that one of the most common answers is, I would have involved my audit and my risk department earlier. Right? Because you kind of are starting the journey with them as opposed to then having to answer a million questions and having to do fix a bunch of vulnerabilities before you can put the systems live. The second thing that we always get is data privacy and IP rights. How do I make sure that sorry, I'm going to pick on you, Zach, again, that Amazon is not training and making my data available to the world? That's honestly something that we are very concerned about as well. So I think it's about, understanding what are the risks, making sure that you take the right precautions. We're also very, very careful about making sure that we have the right IP over the data that we either use or that we commercialize to our customers. And then, honestly, if you work with your partners, if you work with the Amazons and the Microsofts of the world, there's ways to determine how much data you are going to share or not, right? It's not a blanket, but you do have to pay attention. Reliability and traceability. I think, again, I would say as for risk, this is the second conversation that comes. Like, how can I rely on the data, and how do I make sure that I don't end up like that lawyer that was in the papers around 12 months ago that went to a trial, had prepared with ChatGPT and had the wrong information, right? To me, it's about the data you use. Of course, you have to know the data you use. We've done a lot of work with our models to make sure that, I would say, they're grounded in our data, but it's basically that the responses, the information that they expose to us or to our customers is only grounded in the information we expose to the model, right? And actually, when we evaluate models, of course, we're going to evaluate, context window, price. But one of the things we really evaluate is how well does the model follow instructions, right? Especially when we started this journey, we were very focused on saying, you can only, if I ask you a question and you don't know the answer, I'd rather you tell me I don't know than make up the answer based on context, on content that you were trained before. So I'm going to give you a very simple example of what we meant by that. At the very beginning, we would tell, we don't have information about where Henry Ford was born in Moody's. That's not our business, right? And we would ask the model, when was Henry Ford born? And the model would say, although it's not in our corpus of data, I know. It's a little bit of a mischievous kid, right? I know because I was trained based on data that's publicly available, so I know it. We went to the extreme to say, no, if you cannot have the information, if you cannot find the information in this corpus of data, that you are going to say, I don't know, even if it's the most obvious answer, right? And that was our way to, and it's something we evaluate all the time as we expand coverage, as we expand functionalities, but we really went our way to make sure that our way to address hallucinations, our way to enable our customers to be able to trace their responses was by kind of making the model always able to, or always obligated the model to follow instructions. And then the other thing tied to that we've done is we spent a lot of time in trying to jailbreak the model, right? For example, we have a bank and an automated bank of questions and answers. We're always testing the model to make sure that the answers are consistent with the answers that we expected. And then we're trying to jailbreak the model, meaning the model or our solutions, see if it will respond something or it will behave in a way that we don't want the model to behave, right? So, and I've heard it many ways. Like I think that QA, unit tests, and all those things have become more relevant than ever in this world. Third thing, and I would be curious of what's the profile of the people that are from the banks here. But one of the things we observe is we go to the business people, right? I go to the chief risk officer, I go to the chief credit officer, I go to the chief lending officer, I go to a portfolio manager and an asset manager. They're super keen to do this. They're not quite sure how to navigate the technology department or the transformation office. In some other cases, we meet with the technology and they're like, wow, this is amazing, want to do it, but they don't really have a business case to implement. So you're kind of stranded between either business people that know their business very well, but are not sure how to navigate the technology department, or the technology department is not ready to adopt GenAI because it's changed and it's difficult, or a technology department that is super keen to do things, but really doesn't have the business case. So my recommendation is for any of you that are in banks or in technology companies, make sure you have the right stakeholders at the table, and also make sure, again, and this is my last lesson for this, which is start small. To do this, you have to start somewhere, right? And this is, I would say, it's one of the most common things we see, which is you want to do so many things that you don't start anywhere at the end, because there's always a new priority, there's always a new plan. So, if I would say this is the main lesson that we've learned, and we see it at Moody's, right? We just had our management meeting yesterday, and we had 1,000 ideas. But you have to start somewhere when you're going to move to the next phase. So with that, and I have 1 minute 18 left, so I think this is plenty of time for the conclusion, is I would say, I'm going to finish with we have been very committed to the journey of financial services and innovating with GenAI. And we are, super focused on making sure that we are transforming ourselves so we can support the financial services industry, and that we're pairing with the right technology providers, right? We don't claim we're a technology company. We want to always look for the best technology decision, adopt and partner with the likes of AWS, and then, of course, bring our deep matter subject expertise and making sure that we're serving the financial services industry in the best way possible. And with that, I will end here. Thank you very much.